Why do some men, especially the ones who seem the most confident, suddenly lose their composure around an INFJ female? Not because she's loud, not because she's demanding, but because she's the exact opposite. INFJ females don't play the usual dating games. They don't need validation. They don't chase, and that alone, it shakes men to their core. Today, we're breaking down 9 unspoken ways men crumble around an INFJ female without her even trying. Let's dive in. 1. She doesn't feed his ego. Most women are conditioned, whether by society, media, or tradition, to build a man up, stroke his ego, and make him feel like he's the center of their world. They're taught that compliments, constant reassurance, and making a man feel powerful are essential parts of keeping a relationship stable. They soften their words to protect his feelings, downplay their own successes to make him feel more important, and offer unwavering emotional support even when he doesn't necessarily deserve it. And for many men, this has become the norm. They expect it. But an INFJ female, she plays by a different set of rules. She respects a man, yes, but she won't worship him. She doesn't believe in putting someone on a pedestal just because, or their gender or position in her life. If she admires a man, it's because he's earned it through his character, actions, and mindset, not because he expects admiration. This difference is subtle but incredibly powerful. And for a man who is used to women catering to his emotional needs, the absence of that automatic validation is jarring. He starts questioning himself in ways he never has before. At first, he might not even understand why he feels uneasy around her. He'll try the usual tricks. Maybe he brags a little about his accomplishments, expecting her to be impressed. But she doesn't react the way he's used to. She listens, but she doesn't fawn over him. She might acknowledge his achievements with a simple nod or a brief "that's cool," and then effortlessly shift the conversation back to something more meaningful. She doesn't inflate his sense of importance just for the sake of it. She doesn't need to. And that, for a certain type of man, is terrifying. Men who rely on external validation, who have built their confidence on how women respond to them, start to feel uneasy. They realize that without her feeding their ego, their confidence isn't as solid as they thought. Suddenly they start overthinking. Why isn't she impressed? Why doesn't she react the way other women do? Am I not as great as I thought? That self-doubt starts creeping in. It's uncomfortable, and for some men, it's a deal breaker. Instead of rising to the challenge, they crumble. They feel small around her, not because she belittles them, but because she doesn't inflate them. And if a man's confidence is built on shaky ground, her presence alone can make it collapse. But here's where it gets even more interesting. This isn't something she does intentionally. She's not trying to shake a man's confidence. She's simply being herself. She's focused on her own life, her own ambitions, and her own internal validation. She doesn't need to take care of a man's ego to feel fulfilled. She doesn't need to constantly reassure him to keep him around, and that changes the entire dynamic of how men interact with her. A secure, self-assured man, he'll respect it. He won't need her to build him up because he's already built himself. But a man who depends on external validation, he'll struggle. He'll feel unstable, and if he can't adapt, he'll start to pull away, not because she did anything wrong, but because he wasn't strong enough to stand on his own. But that's just the start. Wait until you hear what she does without even speaking that leaves men completely off balance. Asterisk 2. Where silence speaks louder than words. Most people are uncomfortable with silence. They feel the need to fill every empty moment with words, small talk, jokes, explanations, anything to avoid that awkward stillness. Silence makes people nervous because it forces them to sit with their thoughts, their emotions, and, sometimes, their insecurities. But an INFJ female, she doesn't fear silence. She embraces it. She doesn't feel the need to talk just for the sake of talking. If she has something to say, she says it. If she doesn't, she's perfectly fine with the quiet. And that, right there, is where things start to get interesting. Most men aren't used to this. They expect engagement. They expect instant reactions, validation, and feedback. When they tell a joke, they expect laughter. When they brag about their accomplishments, they expect admiration. When they try to get a rise out of a woman, they expect something. But when they meet an INFJ female, they get nothing. She listens, she observes, but she doesn't always react the way they expect. She lets the silence breathe, and that destroys a certain kind of man. He starts overthinking. Did I say something wrong? Is she unimpressed? Why isn't she reacting? Most men are used to getting instant responses from people, especially from women who have been conditioned to keep conversations flowing and make them feel comfortable. When an INFJ female doesn't give them that, it forces them to sit with their own thoughts. It makes them face their own insecurities. And suddenly, they're uncomfortable not because she's doing anything wrong, but because she's not doing what they expect. Silence, when used right, is one of the most powerful tools in social dynamics. It creates intrigue. It demands presence, and it reveals who is truly confident and who is simply performing confidence. A man who is secure in himself, he won't be rattled by her silence. He'll understand that real confidence doesn't come from constant reassurance. But a man who needs validation, he'll crumble. He'll start trying harder, talking more, bragging more, seeking more reactions just to break the silence. And the more he tries, the more obvious it becomes that he needs her approval more than she needs his attention. And here's the kicker: and INFJ female isn't trying to manipulate anyone with silence. She's not playing mind games. She's just being herself. She values meaningful conversations over empty words. She's comfortable in her own presence. And if a man can't handle that, that's his problem, not hers. But here's where things get even more intense. If a man struggles with her silence, imagine what happens when she walks away without a second thought. That's where the real shift happens. Because if silence makes him nervous, her absence will haunt him. 3-2 walks away without a scene. Most people, when they leave a relationship or a situation, feel the need to explain themselves. They want closure, a final word, a dramatic ending that proves their emotions were real. They cry, argue, send long messages, or try to make the other person understand why they're leaving. It's human nature. We want to be heard. But an INFJ female, she doesn't operate like that. If something isn't serving her, whether it's a relationship, a friendship, or an environment, she's gone. No begging, no pleading, no emotional breakdowns, just a quiet, deliberate exit. And that messes with a man's head. Most men are used to resistance. They expect a woman to ask for another chance, to fight for the relationship, or at least to show some sign that she's struggling to let go. Because in their minds, if a woman is upset when she leaves, it means she cared. It means they mattered. And that provides them with a sense of importance even if the relationship is ending. But when an INFJ female simply walks away without the drama, it forces a man to confront a truth he wasn't ready for. He wasn't as important as he thought. That realization is brutal. He might try to justify it at first, telling himself she's just acting tough or playing games to get a reaction. But as time passes, and she doesn't come back, doesn't text, doesn't reach out, it starts sinking in. She's actually gone. She didn't need closure. She didn't need a final conversation. She didn't need him. And that's when the panic sets in. Most men don't realize what they had until it's gone. They start replaying everything in their heads. Did I do something wrong? Was I not enough? How could she just leave like that? They struggle because deep down they expected her to need them more than they needed her. And when she proves otherwise, their ego takes a hit. But here's the secret. An INFJ female doesn't walk away to hurt someone. She walks away for herself. She values her peace over proving a point. She doesn't have time for relationships that drain her energy or men who can't match her level. And if she feels like a situation is no longer aligned with who she is, she doesn't stay and suffer. She leaves and levels up. A weak man will take this as rejection. He'll see her silence as an insult, her absence as an attack. But a strong man, he'll respect it. He'll recognize that a woman who knows her worth isn't going to waste time explaining it. And here's the best part. The moment she walks away, she becomes unforgettable. Because most women don't leave quietly. Most women give men endless chances. Most women stick around waiting for someone to change. But an INFJ female, she doesn't wait, she doesn't chase, she simply moves on. And that's what makes her different. That's what makes her impossible to replace. Think that's intense? Just wait until you hear how she destroys the chase without lifting a finger. Asterisk. For she's unaffected by his games in the world of dating and relationships. Many men rely on certain tactics to keep a woman hooked. The classic hot and cold behavior where they shower her with attention one day and then disappear the next. The strategic delayed replies, making her wait just long enough to wonder what he's doing. The subtle jealousy tests, where they mention other women to spark competition. These tricks work on most women because they trigger emotional responses. The uncertainty, the inconsistency, it creates a psychological pull that keeps a woman guessing, wanting more of his attention, craving his validation. It's a power move, designed to keep her chasing. But an INFJ female, she doesn't bite. She sees the game for what it is, a test of her emotional stability, a tactic to manipulate her feelings, and instead of playing along, she opts out entirely. A man tries to make her jealous. She doesn't flinch. He flirts with another woman. To get a reaction she barely notices. He pulls back to see if she chased. She lets him go, and that's where everything backfires on him. Men who play these games expect a reaction. They expect frustration, curiosity, something that tells them their strategy is working. But when they get nothing, when the INFJ female remains completely unbothered, the frustration hits hard. He starts questioning himself. Why isn't she reacting? Is she not interested? Am I losing my touch? This is where the tables turn, because now, instead of her chasing him, he's chasing her. At first he might try harder. He'll escalate the games, testing new ways to get under her skin. Maybe he ignores her longer. Maybe he posts something designed to trigger a response. Maybe he suddenly gives her all his attention to see if she gets attached. But none of it works, because an INFJ female doesn't need external validation. She isn't waiting by her phone. She isn't obsessing over mixed signals. She isn't making a man the center of her world. She's focused on her own life, her own goals, her own growth, and that makes her more powerful than any mind game he could ever play. For men who are used to women reacting, it's a brutal wake-up call. They realize that their usual tricks don't give them control over her emotions. In fact, it does the opposite. It reveals their own insecurities. Because now, they're the ones wondering, overthinking, and craving attention. An INFJ female doesn't resist the game because she's trying to win it. She resists it because she doesn't even see it as worth her time. She's playing an entirely different game, one where self-respect, independence, and emotional intelligence come first. And that's why men struggle around her. But wait, this next one is brutal. Because she doesn't just resist the game, she makes him chase without even trying. 5. She becomes the one he can't figure out. Men are wired to chase what they don't fully understand. It's in their nature. The thrill of the unknown, the excitement of solving a mystery, it keeps them engaged. And that's exactly why INFJ females stand out. She's not like the women he's used to. She's independent but feminine, mysterious but confident, warm but distant. Every time he thinks he's figured her out, she surprises him. And that drives him insane. Most men are used to predictable patterns in relationships. They know what to expect, how to impress, and how to get the reaction they want. But with an INFJ female, there is no pattern. One moment she's deeply engaged in a conversation, her words full of insight and depth. The next she's in her own world, completely unbothered by his presence. She can be warm and inviting but also distant and detached when she chooses. And that imbalance, it hooks him. He starts analyzing everything she says and does. Why does she seem interested but not overly invested? Why does she disappear without explanation? How can she be so emotionally present one day and completely unreachable the next? He becomes obsessed with understanding her, figuring her out, decoding her. But no matter how much he tries, he never quite does. Because here's the truth, she doesn't need to be figured out. An INFJ female isn't playing hard to get, she just as hard to get. Not because she's manipulating anyone, but because she's genuinely unpredictable. She's not following any dating rulebook or playing a role that makes her easier to define. She's simply being herself. And who she is doesn't fit into neat little boxes. That's why men struggle. They want clarity. They want a woman who either needs them or doesn't, who either chases or walks away. But an INFJ female exists in a space where she can be deeply connected to someone without depending on them. She can care about a man without making him her entire world. She can enjoy romance without losing herself in it. And that's a dynamic most men aren't prepared for. They're used to women who make their emotions obvious, who express their love, their frustration, their jealousy in clear, readable ways. But an INFJ female's emotions are her own. She doesn't overshare, she doesn't explain herself. She doesn't react just to reassure a man that he still matters. So he keeps trying, keeps pushing, keeps hoping for a breakthrough. But the more he chases, the more he realizes he's not in control here. And that's when things start to fall apart. Because the moment a man realizes he can't control an INFJ female is the moment he starts to lose control of himself. 6. She can't be controlled. Rules, expectations, traditional roles, most women are taught to follow them. They're expected to adapt, to compromise, to fit into a mold that makes relationships easier for men. But an INFJ female, she doesn't follow the script. She won't shrink herself to make a man comfortable. She won't change her personality to fit into his life. And she definitely won't submit to outdated ideas of what a woman should be. And that shakes men to their core. A man who's used to being in charge, to leading without question, quickly learns that doesn't fly here. His usual dominance, his ability to set the pace of a relationship, his expectations of control, it all falls apart when he meets an INFJ female. Because she doesn't need his guidance. She doesn't need his approval. She makes her own decisions, sets her own standards, and lives by her own rules. And suddenly, he's unsure of himself. At first, he might try to assert his control in subtle ways, testing her boundaries, trying to put her in her place, seeing if she'll bend to his will. But when she stands firm, when she refuses to be controlled, that's when the cracks start to show. Because here's the truth, when a woman can't be controlled, a weak man crumbles. Men who rely on dominance to feel secure need a woman who follows. They need someone who looks to them for guidance, who molds herself to fit their needs. But an INFJ female doesn't do that. She respects a strong partner, but she doesn't follow, she chooses. And if a man can't handle that, he spirals. He gets insecure, frustrated, even resentful. But a strong man, he rises. A confident, self-assured man won't see an INFJ female's independence as a threat, he'll see it as a challenge. He'll respect her strength, match her energy, and appreciate the fact that she doesn't need him. Because that means she's choosing him, and that's the difference. A weak man sees an independent woman and thinks, how do I control her? A strong man sees an independent woman and thinks, how do I grow with her? And that's why INFJ females naturally weed out the weak. She won't tolerate manipulation. She won't entertain power struggles. And she won't stay in a relationship where she has to diminish herself just to make a man feel stronger. If a man tries to control her, he'll end up frustrated. If he tries to break her, he'll end up broken. Because an INFJ female has already mastered the one thing men struggle with most, self-control. And that's what makes her dangerous. Have you ever been told you're too independent in a relationship? Drop A in the comments if that's you. Now, Let's talk about something even more powerful, her detachment. 7. She, single quotes, is detached from his approval. Most women, whether they realize it or not, adjust themselves to be liked. They soften their opinions, laugh at jokes that aren't funny, hold back their success to avoid intimidating a man. Society teaches women to be pleasing, to seek approval, to crave validation, to fit into whatever version of femininity makes men comfortable. But an INFJ female, she doesn't care who approves. She moves through life with a quiet confidence that isn't tied to outside opinions. She doesn't need compliments to feel beautiful, reassurance to feel worthy, or a man's approval to feel secure. She knows who she is. And that changes everything. Because most men expect a woman to seek their validation. They're used to women adjusting, dressing a certain way to impress them, shifting their personalities to match their energy, waiting for their approval before making decisions. But when an INFJ female doesn't do that, when she doesn't ask for his opinion before making a move, when she doesn't fish for compliments or seek his reassurance, when she doesn't dim her light to make him feel bigger, that's when the power shift happens. At first, he might not even notice. He might think she's just playing hard to get. But over time, it starts to sink in. She's not playing anything. She genuinely doesn't care whether he approves or not. She's making choices for herself, not for him. And suddenly he feels powerless. See, most men build their confidence on how much influence they have over a woman. They like to feel needed, wanted, important. But when an INFJ female stands firm in her own self-worth, when she doesn't chase it, doesn't seek validation, doesn't bend herself to fit into his world, he doesn't know what to do with that. Some men will try harder, hoping to win her, over others will pull back, hoping she'll start chasing. But when neither of those things work, that's when the frustration sets in. That's when he realizes that no matter what he does, he can't change her. And for a man who's used to being the center of attention, that's a tough pill to swallow. But here's where things get even more intense, because what happens when she's not just independent, but actually outshines him? That's next. 8. She outshines him without trying. Most women are taught either directly or indirectly to hold back, to soften their success, to downplay their intelligence, to make sure they never overshadow a man. Because in many relationships, a woman being too ambitious, too smart, too successful, that makes things complicated. But an INFJ female, she doesn't shrink for anyone. She's driven, she's accomplished, and she's fully aware of her own power. And the most dangerous part, she doesn't even try to outshine anyone, it just happens. She walks into a room, and people notice. She speaks, and people listen. She sets a goal, and she achieves it without hesitation, without seeking permission, without waiting for someone to tell her she's allowed to go after what she wants. And for the right man, that's inspiring. A confident, secure man sees an INFJ female's success as a gift, not a threat. He doesn't feel the need to compete with her. He wants to grow alongside her. He respects her drive, admires her ambition, and loves that she's a woman who challenges him to be better. But for the wrong man, it's an attack on his ego. Because some men tie their self-worth to being the superior one in a relationship. They need to be the leader, the provider, the one who gets all the attention. They feel powerful when they're needed, when a woman looks to them for guidance, when she depends on them financially, emotionally, or socially. And when an INFJ female doesn't need him at all, when she's making moves, earning respect, and standing in her own power without looking back. That's when the insecurity kicks in. At first, he might act supportive. He might say he admires her ambition, that he loves her confidence. But over time, his actions start to tell a different story. Maybe he makes passive-aggressive comments about how she's too focused on her work. Maybe he starts pulling away when she gets more attention than him. Maybe he tries to subtly undermine her, downplaying her success or making her feel guilty for being too much. And for a lot of women that works. They dim their light to keep the peace. They start making themselves smaller, less ambitious, less successful, just to make sure their man still feels secure. But an INFJ female, she never dims herself for anyone. She keeps rising, she keeps thriving, she keeps setting the bar higher and higher, because her success isn't about him, it's about her. And if a man can't handle that, that's his problem, not hers. Because here's the truth. An INFJ female doesn't compete with men, but she also doesn't step aside to make room for their egos. She's just being herself. And if that makes a man uncomfortable, that's not a reflection of hers, a reflection of his own insecurities. And that's what truly shakes a man to his core. It's not just her intelligence, her success, or her confidence. It's the fact that she's not trying to prove anything. She's not rubbing her achievements in his face. She's not seeking validation. She's not in some imaginary competition. She's just existing at her fullest potential. And for a man who's used to being the alpha, who needs to be the most powerful person in the room, who's built his identity on being the leader, that realization destroys him. But here's the real game changer. It's not just what she does, it's how she makes him feel. And that's what we're about to dive into next. 9. She makes him face his own insecurities. An INFJ female doesn't try to shake a man's confidence. She doesn't play mind games, manipulate, or go out of her way to test him. She's just being herself unapologetically, fully, without hesitation. But that alone changes everything. Because an INFJ female is like a mirror. She reflects exactly what's inside a man, his strengths, his weaknesses, his deepest insecurities. She doesn't expose them on purpose, but just by standing in her own power, she forces him to see himself for who he really is. And for some men, that's terrifying. See, most people spend their whole lives avoiding their insecurities. They distract themselves with work, relationships, validation, anything, to avoid facing their self-doubt, their fears, their weaknesses. But an INFJ female doesn't give them that escape. She doesn't need his approval, so he has to ask himself, why do I need hers? She doesn't play along with his mind games, so he has to wonder, why do I need control? She doesn't chase, so he has to sit with the question, why do I need to be pursued to feel valuable? And suddenly he has to face himself. If he's confident, he grows. A strong, self-assured man will recognize the challenge. He'll see the INFJ female's independence and success as an opportunity, not a threat. Instead of feeling insecure, he'll reflect. He'll ask himself, what is this bringing up in me? Why do I feel this way? How can I level up? And that's the kind of man who thrives with an INFJ female. He's not looking to control her, he's looking to grow alongside her. He sees her strength, and instead of resenting it, he respects it. He steps up. But if he's not confident, he crumbles. A man who hasn't done the inner work, who relies on external validation, who ties his worth to being the stronger one in a relationship, he won't be able to handle it. At first, he might get frustrated. He might try harder to impress her, to make her react, to get her to need him in some way. But when that doesn't work, the cracks start to show. He might start making passive-aggressive comments, trying to subtly bring her down. He might pull away, hoping she chased. He might even lash out, blaming her for his own feelings of inadequacy. But deep down, he knows the truth. It's not her, it's him. She didn't break him, she simply revealed who he already was, and that is the silent effect of an INFJ female. She doesn't destroy men, she just holds up a mirror. If they like what they see, they rise. If they don't, they fall apart. And that's why an INFJ female is so powerful, because she doesn't just change the game, she exposes it. And that is why men crumble around an INFJ female. Not because she's aggressive, not because she's rude, but because she's different. She forces men to step up, or step out. Now, I want to hear from you. Have you ever seen a man struggle with your energy? Share your thoughts below, and if you want to dive deeper into the power of INFJ females, watch this next video, it'll change the way you see yourself. Until next time, stay strong. Stay INFJ *.